Hey friends, it's RSKT, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at an actual official Tangible Waves module today, and that is the new Samplyr module. Samplyr, like it says on the tin, plays back samples, which is really exciting because it means that now we can play back samples within our AE Modular systems and not have to worry too much about external sampling hardware. There's of course nothing wrong with using external hardware, but the fact that you can load up a sample and do a bunch of really cool different things with it and run it through like your own filters and envelopes and do some sort of CV modulation with it, that's really cool. I really appreciate having this. I think it's a fantastic addition to the AE Modular system. Now, before we get too far into the video, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Normally when I do these AE Modular videos, I like to pick out a module and do like a really big deep dive into all of its features so that everything's really well documented and people can refer back to it when they get the module in their hands. Now, I'm not really going to do that with this module today. I am going to sort of show you how it works and a lot of the features, but because I've been using a beta version, which is 1.2b, I believe, not everything is working. Currently, there are still some issues with this module, but hopefully they'll all be ironed out by the time this thing ships to everybody. Also worth noting that this module came shipped with an SD card full of samples, which were really cool. But I also got another SD card provided to me, and I've loaded it up with my own samples. Now, loading samples into this thing isn't as cut and dry as loading into something like the Deluge or the Dirty Wave M8. There are a few extra steps that you have to take in order to prepare your samples to be played back on this thing. And later on in the video, I'm going to jump onto the computer and we'll do a little bit of a tutorial in how I've been preparing my samples so that they work on this. Hey, just jumping in from the future here. When I was talking about how I loaded my own samples onto this, just in case anybody's interested, those samples came from my free sample pack, which I'll leave a link down below in the description. I was originally going to convert all of the samples from that sample pack so that you could just load them up here and sort of do it yourself. But I didn't really see the point in, making like a folder full of like 50 kicks and 50 snares and whatnot. Yeah, it's really useful to have those, but I feel like this is more suited, at least for me personally, using it with like bass samples and lead samples and vocals and things. So, I mean, by all means, you're more than welcome to download that and then follow the tutorial that's coming later in this video where I show you how to convert those samples, or you can just follow that tutorial and load in the samples that you use every day. So yeah, anyways, enough interruption, back to the video. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit just because this screen is really tiny, and let's dive in and have a look at this module. Now, I'm just going to quickly point out some of the issues that I have been having with this module, just so that we can get them out of the way and then dive into the good stuff. Currently, for me at least, using some of these controls over here, so adjusting the sample start, length, and loop on, don't seem to be working for me. So it doesn't really matter what I patch into them, nothing's happening. I will say though that the reverse function is working. There is one other strange issue I've been having where if I feed a random voltage into something like a quantizer on the EuroPi and then patch that into the CV for pitch, I'm getting some very wobbly sort of notes and it's not really functioning quite right. We're not quite sure if that's a problem with the module itself though, or if it's the digital nature of the EuroPi. It could be a number of things and other quantizers might work. I thought that I might just mention it. Other than that, I wouldn't let these negative aspects deter you from getting this module because it is a really fantastic module and I've been using it an awful lot. It's really powerful. And the fact that we just have sampling built into our system is a really great start for what this system might turn into in the future. So let's go over some of the really good stuff. We can see that underneath all of these controls here, we have a little SD card slot, and that's where we can load our samples onto. We've got a bunch of buttons and two knobs. I'm just going to patch the mixer into our audio, and I'll take the sample out and we'll plug that into the mixer for now. Now, obviously, we're not going to hear anything, and that's because we need to trigger the sample. There's a few different ways that you can do that, but what we're going to do is just take this blue sequence here with only one dot on a 16th, and we'll plug that into the gate of Samplyr. And I'm actually just going to use a longer cable for that, just because I don't want it getting in the way of the screen here. So if I hit clock on the Euclid grid down here, wow, that's loud. We can hear it's playing back our sample. and it'll play it through to the end when you stop. So right now on the screen, we can see that we're in folder C, and you'll see how the SD card is set up later on when I show you how to convert your samples. We can flick through this folder by turning this knob, and you can see that we go all the way up to number 9, and then we switch to folder D. So you essentially have 10 samples per folder on your SD card. These buttons under here all have numbers next to them as well, so it actually helps you to quickly navigate through things a little faster. For example, if I were to press 5 on this right now, it jumps to the 5th sample in the D folder, and then I've only just got to scroll a little further to get to E, and I just find that is a much faster way of navigating. Let's have a listen to this one. Cool, so that's some of my drum samples. I'm going to flick back to my bass folder over here. And just have a listen to this one. Yeah, it's pretty loud. So, if we continuously trigger this, we can play around with the frequency knob to repitch it. And you can hear as you push it too high, the sample kind of falls apart. But we do have a little bit of leeway with time stretching. Now, I don't have my 8-step sequencer in this rack at the moment. Really, I could generate pitch a few different ways, but I'm just going to keep things simple and set up a MIDI or CV track on my Deluge over here, plug it in there, just so that we've got some melody stuff to work with. All right, so you can see that I've just taken the bus CV and bus gate and whacked it into the CV and gate input on the sampler module, and that's just taking MIDI from my Deluge over here. I've also hooked that up into our Wasp filter, so yeah, now we've got a really cool bass batch. So obviously that's really cool because yeah, you can do like all of your sort of pitch sequencing and whatnot straight into the module, and I absolutely love that. I've also got another folder of, or 2 folders of sort of lead-like samples. So yeah, pretty fantastic stuff. So I'm going to press the select knob in now, and let's explore some of the features in the menu here. My camera is zoomed in all the way, but I might just sort of move it in a little closer because this screen is very tiny and I want the camera to pick this up. So while we're in this menu, we can turn the select knob and get to a bunch of different features. For example, right now I'm on loop start. So if I press this in again, now we can turn the select knob and change the start point of the sample. So we can hear that there's a bit of a click at the start of this sample. We can move it forward, and now that click is gone. Now it's important to know that when you're working in the menu like this, if I accept that and then go back to exit, the sample is still edited. But if I were to switch to another sample and then switch back, the sample has gone back to the way it was before. So essentially, if we want to change that start point, we need to change the start point. And then you want to scroll across to save. And if I hit save, it's going to save that sample the way that it is. And then every time I recall it, it's going to be like that. Just something to keep in mind when you're working with this. Now you can see that I had to scroll a fair way to get to the save section. So these buttons down below that we use to sort of jump around our sample folders behave the same way down here. We can jump to like loop start and the start point of the sample, crossfading and whatnot. So if I just press start here and then accept that, go back and exit, we're back out. Now I'm not going to go over how to use everything in here, but just so that you've got a bit of an idea of what to expect, you can adjust the start point, the end point. We have the loop start point. So if you set this into loop mode, which is further down in the menu, actually, we can just press 5 and go to loop mode. We can switch between one shot reverse, forward, reverse, alternate, forward hold, alt hold. There's a bunch of different things to choose from. For example, if I switch this to forward and then go to loop length, we can shorten the loop length and then go loop start and bring up where we want our loop point to be. And we can see that that's displayed by these tiny little icons down the side here. It's not really too big an issue from the sample that I'm actually using at the moment, but if you've got something like a breakbeat or maybe some vocal samples, that might be something you want to experiment with. We've also got a crossfade so that we can sort of fade in between these points. And then aside from that, we've got transpose, hot swapping, which we'll go over in just a second. We've got waveform. So every time that you load a sample into the sampler, it generates the waveform once. And then if you edit the sample, the waveform stays the same unless you tell it to, which is what the waveform function is for. We've also got the ability to turn a loop on or off. We can calibrate things, get some info on the waveform and save it. So yeah, you've got a lot of options squeezed into this tiny little screen down here, and it gives you a lot of freedom to experiment with your sounds and do what you want with them. One thing I really like to play around with is turning on the hot chaining mode and then exiting. We can then grab a random voltage of some sort and plug it into sample select. And you can hear that it's flicking through my entire folder of samples. Now, the way I kind of like to do this is by taking the output of a sample on hold and just setting up something like noise going into the input and the trigger coming from the Euclid grid over here. I know that isn't entirely visible, but I do this a lot in all of my videos. So yeah, I've just got like a random thing coming from my sample on hold. I think that's really, really cool. While it's doing this, you might notice that you get stuck in a folder, and that I think is just part of one of the glitches at the moment. So I'll just take that out. We'll jump into the menu, turn hot swapping off, jump back out, and now we can navigate to something like our base folders, which I think works better for this sort of hot swap mode. And then I'll just turn that back on. So you can set this up independently per folder of like how you want it to behave. And then we can plug our sample select back in with our sample on hold. And then I'll just remove some of the notes from my deluge over here. And then we can change the steps on our Euclid grid. Yeah, just, you know, endless fun, endless rhythms. It's really cool to be able to sort of jump around like this. Now, I haven't exactly tried this yet, but I would assume that you could get something like the Sequence 8 module over here, which allows you to set specific voltages per 8 steps. You've got 10 samples in there. So, you know, if you were to load it up with like a kick, snare, hi-hat, maybe a tom or two, and a cymbal, you'd be able to sort of alternate between those. Obviously, it's going to be a mono playback. They're not going to be able to play over each other, but it's really cool that you could use this as a little bit of a drum machine if you wanted to. Now, aside from that, there are some other really cool features that are attached to this. For example, like being able to get a trigger from the loop start or the loop end or the samples end, all of those sort of things, so just to make it sort of play a little bit nicer with other sequences and whatnot that you've got going on in your system. I'm pretty impressed at how feature rich this tiny little unit of a sampler is. I know that there are things out there that exist like, I mean, I myself have a pocket operator PO33, which is a tiny sampler. I've got a Donny Wave M8, which is a tiny sampler. I think like this might be the smallest sampler I've seen in my entire life. I mean, obviously you need like, the rest of the system to make it work, but it's there and it's awesome. I don't really think that I have too much more to say about the module itself. So what we're going to do now is jump onto the computer. We'll go through a tutorial and how I went about preparing my samples, because there are a few different options available for how you want to do it. I just found a way that worked specifically for me because some of the other options didn't really allow for like good transposition, but this one in particular did. And then once that section's done, I'm going to play 4 little demo patches that I've made using the sampler module so far. If you have any other questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments below. And also, maybe just go and check out the manual on Tangible Waves website, because it's absolutely huge. There's just so much packed into this thing. And I've had to read it a few times just to get a decent explanation of what's going on. So here we are inside of Audacity. For those that don't know, Audacity is a free program, so I'll be sure to leave a link to that down below in the description. Once you've got it installed, it should open and look something like this. Now, I'm going to take you through the way that I've been converting all of my samples, and a lot of that comes from the instructions that are on the AE Modular wiki page. If we go to the AE Modular wiki and have a look at the sampler module, there's a lot of information about there that I didn't cover in this video. And if we scroll further down to the bottom, we've got this section called How to Prepare Samples. Now, there's a lot of information in here, and you have a few different options available to you when you do them. The big takeaway for me is that I noticed the higher quality the sample, the less ability I had to do any sort of time stretching with it, or at least edit the frequency in some way. So down here where it talks about different sample rates, I found that 1600 was the best. You still get a really good clean sound. It's not too lo-fi, actually. You can get away with a lot. And I just found it gave me a lot of flexibility in pitching samples up and down. This is also a really good place to come back to if you need a reminder on how to do all of this, so that you don't just have to watch this video 100 times over. So going back to Audacity here, I have a folder on my hard drive. One is called samples, so I've got 10 bass samples in here. And then one is called converted. This is where we're going to put our converted samples. So I'm going to select all of these bass samples and drag and drop them into Audacity. Now you might notice straight away that these samples are actually stereo samples, so there's left and right channels. So the first thing we need to do is to convert these to mono. I'm going to press Ctrl A to select everything. We're going to go up to tracks, mix stereo down to mono, and now they're all mono tracks. The next thing we're going to do with all of these still selected is go up to effect, press amplify, and just make sure that the new peak volume is at 0 decibels. Now we need to set the rate of our project, so we're actually just going to go up to audio setup, go to audio settings, and where it says project sample rate, we're going to change this to 16,000 Hertz. Then we're going to convert our tracks, because we can still see over on the left here that they're at 48,000 Hertz. So we're going to go up to tracks, resample, and change this sample rate to 16,000 as well. And now we can see that they're all 16,000 Hertz. Now, the instructions on the AE Modular wiki page kind of say that these things are in a few different other places. And they do also mention like different versions of Audacity, kind of place them in different places. So just have a look. This is where they live for me, and I'm using the latest updated version, I believe. So just for anybody wondering what that version is, I'm using Audacity 3.3.3. So we're nearly done here. With all of these still selected, we're going to go up to File, export. And if you're just doing one sample, you can go export wave and leave this setting as unsigned 8-bit PCM. Or if we're doing multiple samples, which we are, we're going to go export multiple. We want to make sure that we're in the converted folder, that the format is wave, and the encoding is unsigned 8-bit PCM. And now they're all exported. Finally, in our converted sample folder, if we were to load these onto the module right now, it's not going to read them. The module needs these samples to have numbers in front of them from 0 through to 9. So I'm going to go through and put a 0 in front of this one, and then continue to place each number as it needs. And there we go. Now they're all 0 through to 9. Now this window over here is the actual SD card that plugs into my module, and you can see that I've got them going down in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. I believe that you can go all the way to Z, and this is pretty much how you will arrange your samples. So if I go into A, you'll see that I've got 9 samples in here. You'll also notice that there's this .par file. This is essentially a file that gets created when the module reads your samples for the first time. So I'm going to come down to H. We'll copy all of these samples, paste them in there, and now we can plug this into our module and those samples are ready to go. Anyways, that's pretty much it for the overview today. So now I'm going to leave you with some demo patches that I've made using this module. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down below. Hit the like if you like, and if you don't, tell me why. Please subscribe, check me out on Patreon, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.